I aka paha oe I alo, I kekahi aka nei. I kalaau a ke kaukawali'i, I nui ke aho. A hiki ia Mauliola, I ola nā mahina uli. I ola ia Mauliola. I aka paha oe I alo, I kekahi aka nei. I kalaau a ke kaukawali'i, I nui ke aho. A hiki ia Mauliola, I ola nā mahina uli. I ola ia Mauliola. I aka paha oe I alo, I kekahi aka nei. I kalaau a ke kaukawali'i, I nui ke aho. A hiki ia Mauliola, I ola nā mahina uli. I ola ia Mauliola.
So welcome to everyone to another episode of HONUA. I'm Mauliola and I'm here again with Reni Aʻiaʻi Bello. Would you like to introduce yourself to whoever might be new?
Okay. Aloha mai kākou.
Aloha.
Aʻiaʻi Bello ke ia. A'o wau kekahi wahine hana mau mana makaʻaoʻao o ka hoʻola a me ka Mauliola. No Hawaii mai au, no Maui mai kūpuna wahine. He kumu kaiapuni mamua, kumu kula, me nā mea he nui. I ke ia manawa, a'o wau I ka papaoli. He wahine kuku kapana ho'i. E lua a'u keiki, e kolu a me ka hapalua a'u mo'opuna. E hanau ana kekahi hou ma nowe mapa. Ana leila I ke ia wā o ke COVID, I ke ia manawa kanalua nui. Mana o wau he mana o maika'i e kamaʻilio iki e pili ana I ka Mauliola. Oia no ka moʻomana o ke ia kamaʻilio ke ia la.
Mahalo nui. So for our non-olelo people, or people who are still learning, we are introducing today's topic of Mauliola, introducing a model of Hawaiian health and well-being with our Reni Aʻiaʻi Bello. And do you want to give a little bit of context for this time that we're in with COVID, as you mentioned, and why we want to be talking about this now and what that might look like, or what that does look like from your perspective?
Yes, of course. Well, this kind of took root in the fact that the kumuhula here in Hawaii got together, and with the crisis that we face with COVID right now and increasing numbers that we've had in Hawaii, it's been really important to understand how we're trying to approach this, to combat this. As the hula community, and this was kind of instigated by Mehana Hain, but there are many kumuhula who heard the call and came forth. And so it is an effort that is initiated and led by kumuhula because of their connectedness and their understanding of Hawaiian culture and healing and well-being. Because like Pueopata said, hula is life. And although I'm not a kumuhula, hula is my foundation and has always been my foundation to all things Hawaii. And so for me, it's really very, very important that that we have these dialogues. And so in our dialogues about Oli, and so the initiative by the kumuhula is an intent to flatten the COVID curve. And so on August 16th, we started by doing pule at noon. We're going to go a 3 anahulu, or also from Mauli to Mauli. Mauli is a moon phase, in case you don't know. And it is a dark moon, so there is no light. And it is a good time to start things because everything comes from the po, mai kapo mai. And the po doesn't just refer to night, but it refers to the abyss. It refers to everything, in everything in existence in our human life, but everything in existence in the universe as well. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to just look at some terminology. So this movement, the attempt is to, by the initiative taken by the kumu, consists of pule, but also taking precautions in our daily life in order to become stronger and to strengthen our mauli. Yeah. So this initiative has a name, and it is called Lāhui Kānaka. And so I want to go over this because many of you may not have that understanding of Lāhui as it's used here. So I'm going to share a screen, and we're going to be looking at a dictionary meaning of Lāhui and a few other terms. So if you can see, Lāhui, nation, race, tribe, people, nationality, great company of people, species as of animal or fish, breed, national, racial, Lāhui kaua, a warring people, a large company of soldiers, au, Lepupalika, Lāhui, National Republic, Lāhui Aʻiaʻi, nomadic people or gypsy peoples. But, and then you have the term Lāhui with the sense of coming together and gathering. So it is one of the connotations that using, as we say, Lāhui Kānaka. But we're looking also at the third definition, which is to prohibit, to forbid, to lay taboo, to proclaim a law. And we're looking at it as kind of like a kapu that is imposed. So as kumuhula, they have the ability to impose a kapu and to have their haumana follow those kapu. And so it reaches far into the community. And so that means that there are large numbers of people who will be doing these things. So as I said before, it doesn't consist only of pule, although that's my area where I put a lot of energy and attention into, but it also has to do with lifestyle. It has to do with following social distancing, and maintaining your own little palama. And we'll look at the word palama in a minute, but we're going to continue with these meanings. So mauli, before we get to Mauliola, we're going to look at mauli. Mauli, the life, the heart, the seat of life. It can also refer to ghost or spirit because it's still there even when the physical body passes. Mauli hiba, choice of precious life. The mauli is also your manava or your fontanel, and that is your crown chakra. That is your direct line to spirit or to your kūpuna. And then we can go back, and we know that Mauliola was the name of a deity, and that first chant that was done was a pule ho'ola, a pule to give life, and it was entitled Na Mauliola, and it comes from the epic of Hi'iaka and Pele. And so Mauliola as a deity. And you know, when we understand the term deity, it's not really in the Western terms. It's more understanding it from a Hawaiian point of view, as understanding it as an element of nature, or even in this case, a process. Yeah. And then here we have Mauliola. So long before this initiative came out, I had already put forth, you know, over the years, what I understand to be a model of Hawaiian health. And it's based on relationships. So I had entitled that Mauliola. But here we see another meaning that says breath of life, power of healing, kalai ka Mauliola, the sun at the source of life. Kihea Mauliola, which is what we say when somebody sneezes. And we'll look at that. Now, there was one other term that I used, and the term was palama. And this is a term that we have kind of adapted. And it came from Uncle Al Lagunero on Maui, who, as we know, is a makaula. And he has wisdom way, way beyond his years. And so traditionally, the pālama was an enclosure that was made of lama wood. And it was used for different things. It could be used to hold ceremony. It could be used as a sacred space. And with all the connotations of the lama wood. And so lama is a clear wood, but we're using that term as your little bubble for social distancing. And I guess it's a bubble that spans 6 feet in every direction. So I don't think the bubble itself is 6 feet wide. If anything, it's going to be 12 or 13 if we extend it in both ways. And, you know, the importance of following all of these things, it's the combination of everything that's going to allow us to take more control of our lives as Kanaka and to participate and interact and actually make a difference. And so this is your opportunity to do so. But getting back to Mauliola. So Mauliola for me it's a Hawaiian model of health, and I base it on relationships, or pilina. So there are 3 relationships. One of the relationships, and no one takes precedence above the other. And that's the other thing, is like, you know, in the Western world, everything has to have a priority where one is better or one is more important. And with this model, what happens is that there's a balancing effect, because it's not stagnant, it's very dynamic, and our lives are dynamic. So as we seek balance, it's kind of like that little seesaw that teeters back and forth, or like the waves of the ocean that ebb and flow. It's ongoing movement, and it's ongoing energy. So the 3 pilina are āina, Kanaka, or other people, and then ourselves. Now, at one point I had in a 4th one, but as I've gone deeper into it, I go back to the 3. So the 4th one would be your pilina to akua, or to a divine, or to a higher power. And as I've come to practice kapu aloha and to practice self-care and self-love, I've combined those 2 together because I do believe in the divinity within. So in these relationships in our lives, a lot of times during one part of our life, there's an emphasis on one relationship. Then later there's another one. Right now with COVID, at least here in Oahu, there has been a huge shift onto aloha āina as people are starting to grow their own food. My cousin's husband works for Home Depot, and the Home Depot in Hawaii has top sales in the nation right now, because everybody's either fixing up their house or growing things. He said that the minute they get in a shipping of like perlite and soil and fertilizer, it's gone. And because I have been hunting down potting soil and everything for the longest time. And so it's good to know that our people know where to turn to, you know. So that aloha āina can encompass so many things. It can be picking up a piece of trash. It can be taking care of your yard. It can be taking care of the land, and the land, of course, will always give back to you. So, for example, in my case, I had kind of abandoned my little āina that I live on, because we commuted to school. And so, you know, our days were like in the car, off to school, meetings, come back home, take a shower and sleep, and you're off again the next day. And so once I broke that cycle and my children grew up, I started planting native plants on my land. And now with COVID, I have this garden that is like invading my driveway. But, you know, the land always has given us and has always sustained us. And when we say land, we are also including the ocean. So for those of us who are lucky enough to know people who fish and to receive fish from them, you know, it isn't, and all of these relationships are interdependent. They're not one-sided. They're reciprocal, and they all need tending at one time or another, because should we abandon one of them too much, we will see an imbalance, and that will reflect in both our health and our well-being. You know, from the Western point of view, they have scientific studies that show that when you get your hands into the dirt, your brain creates happy enzymes, and it tells you happy, happy, happy. So that's why children are unadulterated and they don't have all those blocks in there, and they want to be in the mud and they want to be in the dirt, and they're so happy. But we have been trained, ugh, don't get dirty, wash your hands, you know. So it's kind of that going back to be a child. So that's one of the relationships, and we do have that term aloha āina, and malama āina, right? And that also includes our water, because the whole term water and wairua and vai, that's a whole nother story. But the second pilina that we look at is aloha. It's how do we treat each other? How do we interact with other people? How do we embrace the people that irk us and irritate us? How do we come to terms with that? How can we demonstrate aloha? How can we feel aloha? And this is where, you know, the aloha, really loosely translated as love, is not enough. The Western translation does not do justice to the meaning of aloha. I like to bring in the term compassionate. I like to bring in the term altruistic and ideal. I like to bring in the term Christ-like love, because there are many people who are Christians. And so hopefully with all of that, we can begin to get a better understanding. But basically, in relationship to others, it's treat others how you want to be treated. And when we take it up a notch and we talk in esoteric terms, it's understanding the common connection that we all have in the universe. And so I had a friend in Spain, his name was Cayetano Arroyo, and he used to channel the Arabic sages who lived in southern Spain at the time of the, you know, the time of the Enlightenment, and when the Arabic Empire was focused there. And he has a book called Yo Soy Tu Mismo, and it's that I am you. I am your very self. So aloha kekahi comes down to treat others like you want to be treated. But it also goes deeper. It's like, if you really understand how connected we are, can we treat somebody poorly? Because we're really doing it to ourselves. And if we're not doing it directly to ourselves, the impact that comes from that will affect us in one way or another. And so that's a lot of food for thought. And, you know, it's very hard sometimes to feel like we can, quote, love everybody, or love your enemies, or love somebody who you outright see as doing something that hurts. But that compassion of knowing that everybody is trying to survive, of knowing that nobody is perfect, if not, we wouldn't be here. That kind of compassion gives way to understanding, to forgiveness, to acceptance. And so that's a really important pilina. And so I ask anybody who's listening to this right now to think about those places in your life where maybe there's some place you're holding a grudge, or there's this person that did this one thing to you and you still can't get over it. And every time you see them, your blood boils up again and you start thinking, or that you just feel really hurt, you know? And most likely whatever happened wasn't because they tried to do it to you. It was because they were hurting themselves and they couldn't figure out how to do it, or that was their way of coping, or they were lashing out because they couldn't find a way to resolve it. They couldn't find a way to do it. So that and these relationships, by the way, they're not easy to maintain. They take a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, and it takes everyday work. So we're gonna get to the third and fourth one, which is I term it kapu aloha. You know, I understand on the Mauna that it was used, and the emphasis was this is how you treat everybody, you know. And by holding yourself in kapu, you do this, you know. I always joke around with poor case, and I say, yeah, I'm waiting for noa aloha, because you know kapu can be explained as an abnormal state of being, the non-norm. So when you're placed under kapu, and a really good example is like for people of my generation. And if you're not of that generation and you can't understand any of this, then learn it. Because, you know, when I was a kid, it was like, I kapu the front seat, right? And that means that front seat of the car that was normally open for anybody to sit in was now, it changed status. Now it was exclusively for you. So that's what a kapu is. It changes the status of thing to something that's out of the normal. Now, my children, they say shotgun. And when they first told me that, I had no notion of what they were talking about. And basically shotgun equals I kapu the front seat. Yeah. So kapu is a state that is different from what the norm is. And noa is when it's always the norm. So I'm waiting for when aloha and the way that things are done is the common everyday norm. That it doesn't have to be only in these circumstances or on these occasions or when this is happening. So I'm waiting for noa aloha, and I know I might wait a long time, but kapu aloha, what that process, when you start to begin and when you start to practice kapu aloha, you realize that you enter into a process of self-analyzing, self-assessment, self-corrective behavior, consciousness and awareness of your words, of your thoughts, of your behavior, that, you know, the busyness of life a lot of times doesn't allow us to address. And so kapu aloha starts you on that journey. And the longer that you try to maintain and the more you try to work with kapu aloha, the deeper you delve into yourself and understanding yourself. And so as I delve deeper, I realized, oh, so akua is not something out there. And I'm using akua with a capital A in the Western sense. And that brings me, I'm going to give a short little blurb because this is a whole nother talk about the God within and God without. Okay. So just the term without, it connotates lack for us. It means that you don't have something. It means that you're missing it. And the God within is what we all are. All of us have that mauli in us. All of us have that life energy, that life seat, the thing that gives us life. And for me, I believe that is what God is. That is what the higher power is. That, and that when we discover it in ourselves, the more that we cultivate it, then the more enlightened we become, the more divine we become, and we bring it into manifest into this physical world. So The God without also has to do with the kind of power struggles that there were in the Western world, you know, religious and politics. How do you get more power, right? You make it exclusive to somebody or something, and you disempower and disable the masses. And that's what I think is brilliant about COVID, is that this is a time of empowerment for us as people, as empowerment for us as Kanaka, simply because we know that we can go back to the teachings of our kūpuna and these very basic understandings of our pilina with nature, or na akua, as Antipua Kanahele says, that think of akua as an element of nature. Yeah, that's why like all our names, our winds have names, the rains have names, you know, and when it is something that personal, you know, you don't call your friends you call them by their name, because the name allows them to exist in your world. And so as we call on the Mauliola wind or the Mauliola rain, or we call now on ekala ki ola ola, we call on kaneho'alani, that activates that energy and that way that we interact with that energy. So as we look at these relationships, the three of them, and you know, and if you are Christian and you have that understanding that the God is something outside, far over there, and that you're always working toward that perfection, or that's fine too. Again, this is my understanding and my model of Hawaiian health and of health in general. But I believe that one of the ways, and something that is very difficult to do and impossible to do, is that if we do not love ourselves and embrace ourselves, we cannot do that to others. And we might not have that process perfected, but it's getting us to that place. So the more that we can do that, and you know, in my women's circles, the last 5 or 6 years that I was holding them regularly, there was so much emphasis on self-care and loving yourself, because Western society has not taught us that. You know, acknowledgement of who we are and what we can do and the gifts that we carry is very important. And when those things are not acknowledged, we have things like low self-esteem. We have a lot of the problems that children have in school, a lot of the problems that adults have adapting to real life. You know, the military, the prison system, they do everything they can to break that concept of self-esteem. In the military, you become a number, and you better be the number that is obedient, you know? And, you know, do we really have a process in society? Do we really truly believe in healing and rehabilitation? And if we do, then where are the institutions? Where are those entities? And how much money is being funneled into them to look at the good of all our society, our whole society? See, because we cannot look at Mauliola without thinking of well-being on both the collective scale as well as the individual. See, that's also where the teeter-tottering comes back and forth, right? We got to find something that can work for everybody, or that you can live with. And the more you consider yourself a part of the whole or a part of the collective, but as well as understanding what you have as an individual to contribute, the easier it is to find the balance. And we know that we all have many talents. We all have a lot to offer. And not all of it is the success stories or the headliners. You know, it's really cool to be that mother who stays home with her child and who puts her energy into raising these precious children, you know? And so when we look at these things, these three pilina again, or relationships with the land, aloha āina, with others, aloha kekahi kekahi, and aloha iho, or kapu aloha, that process of self-love and self-assessment. Because if you love yourself, you will put out that energy to constantly make things better, to constantly deepen your understanding and your skill set and everything else. So basically, our Mauliola of ourself, as well as our family, our community, our Lāhui, depends on these, on how well we're balancing and working at these things. And, you know, Mother Earth is going through a hard time right now because for a long time, there hasn't been the aloha āina that there should have been. And yet right now, I think it's fabulous that there are so many initiatives. Some people think it's too late, so why bother? It's never too late. You know, if you look through history, everything is cyclical. And when we haven't learned it the first time around, we come back the second time around. Yeah, Emily, what do you think about that?
My goodness. So I didn't want to interrupt your flow because I was really enjoying this, but I've been writing so
Oh,
many
your little notes.
because
Okay, yes.
You know, because it's just bringing up so much for me, and I almost kind of want to work backwards because I'm thinking now of, you know, all the things you're saying about self-esteem in relationship to balancing these relationships and these different pilinas. I was actually thinking last night about what it means, like, to, because I personally I have a hard time accepting compliments. I feel very embarrassed by that. You know, from this, it doesn't matter what kind of compliment it is. I think most of us have trouble taking compliments. But I was thinking of, like, you know, a compliment, like if there's anything that I'm doing well, or that somebody sees something good in me, it's a mirror. There's a reflexive property about that, or reflexive principle, that I think is part of what self-esteem means, or how you cultivate self-esteem. And I mean, to me, it's like it's a way of balancing that, the individualism with the collective, and how,
Exactly.
you know, how, like, if I have self-esteem, if I have confidence, it's because I am mirroring the people and the experiences and the good things that I have, that I've, you know, been experiencing and interacting with and being in relationship with, you know, up until this point. So if somebody offers me a compliment, or I offer somebody else a compliment, that's a reflective principle there, in my mind. So I'm just, so that's kind of going through my mind, and also, like, because before, when you were talking about Home Depot, and everybody kind of, you know, all the soil, all the potting soil is flying off the shelf. I mean, you phrased it as, you know, people, you know, in this time of crisis and uncertainty, like, people do instinctively know where to turn to, and that's to āina, whether that's, you know, whether you're living in the city and you've got a little box garden outside, or you have a river to go to, you have like a lo'i to go to, or something like that. People instinctively know where to turn to, and āina is, like, I mean, like how you said, āina is the ocean. Āina isn't just like land or soil. It's like, āina is the ocean. Āina is everything that feeds us in every way possible. And I'm reminded of that. I learned this a few years ago, that, like, ohana was not always the word for family. Āina was the word for family.
In Samoan, it still is āina. You know, they still use that term.
So, you know, the idea of like the fact that that's still, even under, even after everything that's happened historically around the world, that people know instinctively that āina is the place to go in a time of crisis. That's inspiring to me. And the fact that, I mean, you brought up the idea of calling, where you're talking about akua and how, some people get hung up on like translations, English translations of like, oh, it's like a deity or it's a god or something like that, but to think of it more so as an element or a process of nature, that, you wouldn't, like, if you're trying to establish a relationship with a friend or a family member, like, you're not just gonna say like, hey, like, you're gonna call them by their name. And when I think about āina and like reestablishing relationship to āina, there's so many places that have names that have been buried or forgotten or haven't been called in so long. And, it's just yet another reason, better reason than ever, better time than ever, to go looking for those names of the winds, those names of the rains, the names of the rivers. Where does your water come from? I just, I'm living in town now. I'm like, where does my water come from? I have to go look at a map. Where does my water come from?
Yeah, and then you better check with the
that.
Board of Water Supply too, because you never know, how they do things nowadays.
Yeah. So, so naming, like speaking those names into existence, remembering them, like they want to be remembered. The rains want to be remembered by name. The winds want to be remembered by name. So I just thinking about, again, just how are we cultivating those relationships and finding that balance between how am I reflecting the goodness and the power and the elements around me, so that I do have self-esteem, and that self-esteem is because of the strength. My self-esteem is built on the strength of my relationships to the world around me and all the elements around me. So yeah, I'm loving this perspective, and I'm loving the idea of I think, so at the beginning you had said, just before introducing these three, sometimes four pilina, that, it's not as if one is more important than the other. And that idea of hierarchy versus like balance and interdependence, I'm thinking too as something really important that's being brought up, especially during COVID, especially during all of this, all of the upheaval around, police brutality in the US and, around the world, all these different issues that in so many ways do stem from hierarchy, from whether it's political, class hierarchy, racial hierarchies, all these things, to think about what it is to restore our sense of self, our sense of self-worth, our health, and rebuilding those processes in a healthy way. Like in so many ways, this is a kind of overturning of all of those ideas of hierarchy and notions of hierarchy that keep us stuck in unhealthy patterns. And so,
Holy.
like,
holy
the system, all of them. But yeah, to really look at what it is to respond to like a pandemic in this case, like, how do we do that from a cultural foundation where we're not just trying to resist, like, oh, like I don't like Ige, telling me what to do and all this kind of stuff, and we kind of get in resistance mode around being so inconvenienced in very real ways, but from the small thing to the big thing, like why, if we're resisting the system, what are we actually proposing that we implement instead?
I have the answer to that. No.
and so if we look at how we build health, and how we nurture the relationships that we want to nurture, like this is a fabulous way to do that, to where we're not, I just keep thinking about like the history of disease, like the history of colonialism, and the way that Native people have been, like, just the decimation and the genocide and all these things that have happened as a result of disease. And if our ancestors understood the way that disease is transmitted, like how would they have responded in order to combat that, in order to save as many lives as possible? And we have the benefit of 2020 hindsight, and the benefit of practice over these hundreds of years. So I, again, I'm really loving the idea of like placing ourselves, how you're describing like the Lāhui Kānaka Initiative, placing ourselves in a kind of kapu that is not just like the short-term temporary thing in response to COVID, but about nurturing and resetting the things that need to be changed, so that, you know, the future is better than, you know, the past that we just we just been moving through.
Yeah, well, I want to share with you word for word from the collective. This is kind of like a short summary of the initiative itself, yeah? In response to the sharp increase of COVID-19 cases affecting the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community, a hui of Kumuhula from across the āina agreed to a 30-day or 3 anakulu Lāhui Kānaka to help, and that's again the kapu, to help stop the spread of coronavirus. Lāhui Kānaka is a kapu that began on August 16th with the rising of the Mauli moon and will continue for 3 anahulu 10-day periods until the next Mauli moon on September 14th. And already we are foreseeing that we will probably extend that time, yeah. It represents a gathering of intentions focused on Mauliola, health and well-being, to stop the spread of COVID-19 in Hawaii. The focus during this time is on Mauliola, and the kumu and their haumana are committed to modifying their personal behaviors, such as staying at home, limiting gatherings, wearing masks when they must interact, aipono and pule at noon each day. So each halau and each kumu are giving their specifics to their students of what they can foresee this as, or what they see it as. But, you know, it's something that is in the making. It is something that is already changing and progressing as we go along. And so everybody's putting out their thing. So I don't have a halau, but I have my chant people, and that we have been chanting since the end of March, April, May, and it turned into a COVID thing. Then we did some pule for solstice, but this is what I recently put out to the people who I call upon for ceremony and prayers when I need. And it says, here's my list of things for your own protection. And notice that they're not only all counter things. We're not just trying to do the wear the mask and social distance. We're also building our own immunity physically by eating, by aipono, and by going into the sun. So you're gonna see some of the things here. So these things are are for your own protection as you engage in this effort to help our ohana and friends. And I think if I can, I'm going to share this so that you can see it instead of just hear me. So first of all, drink lots of water. And for me, anybody who knows me, they know if anything happens, I tell them to drink water. My poor children are tired, you know, they get a cut and I tell them to drink water. But it's because we are water. And staying hydrated is also one of the things that the scientists have found, that it is important for us to drink lots of water for any kind of illness, because water is what flushes things out, right? My second point is do focused breathing every chance you get. And focused breathing for me is mindful breathing. You know, it's where you hanu or inhale and you hold it for whatever length of time, and it doesn't have to be a lot. And then you ha, which is your exhale. And especially if you're finding yourself stressed during this time, whether it's for work or finances or having the kids at home all the time, or like Emily said, you know, we are inconvenienced. And we need to ask ourselves if we're just being in, why we're so inconvenienced. And if we're inconvenienced because it's kind of our colonized self saying, I need everything right here, right now, just when I want it, then we need to ask ourselves, is that really that important? And usually we can dissipate it just by thinking about that and bringing our awareness there. Also, if you're around someone else who is really stressed or ill, take the time to breathe. Have them breathe with you. Teach your keiki to breathe. I know in my email it says Reiki right here, but it's supposed to be keiki.
You can do both.
And then we have the normal things, right? Practice social distancing, wearing masks, washing hands, personal hygiene, disposable paper products, within sanitized surfaces. Kapu aloha to yourself means honoring yourself in the divine within. Continuously. We're always adjusting and assessing and reassessing. So for us, we do pule at 7 in the morning, and I decided not to change that since so many people have worked their schedule and worked their time around it. But the pule that the initiative is putting forward is the noonday pule. And basically, kaukalai kalolo is when you have no shadow. And the reason being that there is an alignment from your crown chakra through your body into the āina at that time. And when we pule and oli collectively, it just doesn't increase the amount of energy. It's the way energy works. Yeah, the energy is not, okay, there's 10 people, so there's 10 times the energy. When we come together in that sense, the energy increases exponentially. And that is what we're hoping and counting on. I also, because my people are mostly chanters and they get off on this kind of stuff too, I also have pule for sunset that should be done before it gets dark. The sun could have set, but it's still light and you can still pule during that time. But once it's dark, then it's time to leave the oli. The other thing is that I think is good. It's kind of like going out into the sun every day, or at least get outside, instead of being cooped up in a physical space, you know, and get your body moving. Whether you're doing something with YouTube in your living room or running down the street. I've never seen so many walkers and runners on my street ever, you know. And the other part is the self-control. We control our thoughts. We control our emotions. When they control us is when we feel that things are not going right. So have good thoughts. Do things that stimulate your mind. Learn something new. For example, my birthday falls right in the middle of the Mid-Autumn Festival this year. So I decided because I'm part Chinese, I'm gonna learn how to make mooncakes. You know, have compassion even for yourself. You know, maybe you're a taskmaster and during this time you make a list of everything you want to accomplish that you never have chance to do. Don't get upset with yourself because you didn't do the whole list. See, that's the kind of thing that people allow that kind of thing to kind of creep their way into your life, right? So that control, that we do control our thoughts. And if you stand with compassion and gratitude, and you are open to the lessons that COVID offers you personally. COVID isn't only something bad and wrong and horrible. COVID is something that is giving us an opportunity to learn greater spiritual lessons, to go deeper into our culture and who we are, and to try to find a balance and find our Mauliola. Not just for ourselves, but for our family, for our community. And what it is, it's setting the stage for whatever is going to come after this huliao, or even during the huliao. It's starting to put into places key factors, you know? So we're building both spiritual and physical immunity, because when we elevate our vibration and we can maintain a higher frequency, through whatever practices, breathing, essential oils, diffusers, la'au, lomi, exercise, meditation, music, art, or just hard work, you know. Being out there weeding your yard actually has incredible impact on your health. you know. And the last thing that I wanted to mention to the people that I address is, when you need help, please reach out. You know, we in Hawaii especially, we have this concept kind of like of a false humility where I don't want to bother them. Oh, you know, but I don't want to bother them, but I don't want to bother them. This is the time to strengthen those pilina, those relationships. Call them. I'm in the process of trying to put together a kind of a COVID hotline. It's not a professional advice. It's just another human person willing to listen to you and talk story with whatever might be bothering you if you feel overwhelmed by anything, and possibly direct you to where you can get specific help if that's what you need. You know, your well-being is of great importance to me, because my well-being depends on that. And if we think like that, then we can understand. So I'm telling people I'm just a Zoom away or a phone call away, but also I'm asking people that if you do work in the healing arts, if you want to be that listening ear, if you're willing to put in, you know, one shift a week or whatever to contact me. And let's see what we can put together to serve our Lāhui. There's no money involved in this. This is purely voluntary and not mandatory. But we do have some ground rules because there is no money involved in it. And so, you know, those are food for thought. But this all has to do with our Mauliola. And that's the purpose that I wanted to talk, that in case people didn't understand the term, and I wanted to share my model of health and well-being. And in my model, when I speak of those pilina, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody except myself. I just want to make that clear, because there's so much stuff happening out there. You know, I don't want things to be mistaken or to be misstrewn and go. But I do believe that we're in to do this, not just for 1 month or you know, 3 anahulu. We'll probably be kind of going, I foresee, until the end of the year. And it is a great exertion of energy and time for some people to do these pule. So if you can't do all 3, if you can just get the one at noonday done, that is good. But you know, every halau is determining which oli are being done, and there are also oli being written especially for this. And although it started in the hula community, as I said, I am not a kumu hula, but because I'm in the pule realm, that's kind of how I got on board. But we want to extend it to everybody, but we're trying at this point to lay foundation. And I feel that because I don't have a halau, it's important that I lay this foundation for the people who do chant with me and the people who do kind of follow the kinds of things that I do. So that about wraps it up, unless you have any other thoughts or any questions, Emily.
I think that is good. I mean, I always have lots and lots of lots of thoughts and lots of notes. I just keep them in my journals and stuff. But yeah, I think this is really good. And you know, for people that want to get involved or want to like take the time, at least at noon, to just, you know, be outside and be in a prayerful mode. I'm gonna post your contact for
That's fine.
for that, and your contact if anybody wants to, you know, be a part of that support line, that volunteer support line. And yeah, I mean, contact your local kumuhula and see, you know, see who you can connect with on protocols for the next, you know, as you said, I mean, it's the next 3 anahulu, but you know, it's most likely going to be until the end of the year, which is, yeah, it's going to be a powerful reset. It's going to be a powerful reset. Well, okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that, and yeah, we'll be online again. We'll be in touch
Yeah,
again.
thank you. It's always a pleasure. Aloha
Aloha.
no.
O kaula I ke akua I nana mai kou mau pula pula I ola kani ko ua hau makai walea palalau hala kaui ka puania